Hello everyone and welcome to Biblical Prepping. I'm Judith Garten. This is the prepper portion. Now over here you see I have my seed boxes. I'll be talking about those in another video that'll be published soon on YouTube. And look forward to that because it's an interesting video. I want to ask you a question today. It's a question I learned the answer to for us. Do you know how to identify where you are lax in your preparedness? Now remember, a lot of people think that preparedness just means that you're one of those families who's preparing for Armageddon. But you're not. You're preparing your family for anything that might come your way. Now, I already know the answer to that question. The best way to find out what you're missing and what pieces you need to replace in your preparedness journey, well, have some crap hit the fan. Take my word for it. I mean it. If you think you've got everything in order, you will instantly discover where your shortfalls are when you have crap hit the fan. I have been into emergency preparedness for well over 30 years. I learned canning in my early 20s with 2 toddlers on hand. Can you imagine that? I also learned to grind and bake with whole wheat flour shortly after that. I currently keep flour, dry goods, and everything I could think of that I will need at least stocked up a little bit at all times. Now, at one point in my life, I did have 18 months worth of food storage set aside, which was really great. However, I've not been that diligent. We have about 2 to 3 months worth right now. And if I can have things growing in the garden, that will add to it. We already knew we needed to update all of that information and get our food storage in order with that. But there are big areas I now know I am lax in, such as the longevity of all of our food storage. I need to check the dates and inventory that. We definitely need more food, as I said, to make it through a long-term issue in our home. But what about a random sudden emergency? Well, recently we found some things out for ourselves. As I said, it used to be called emergency preparedness, and over time it was shortened to just preparedness. And again, everybody in that field or doing that for their family is often called preppers. And yes, that's us. We are preppers, the kind of people who want to be ready for any urgency or emergency that crops up. And to me, there's a difference between those 2 types that I mentioned, urgency and emergency. But there's also a distinct difference between various types of people who do prepare for emergencies. There's the everyday prepper who wants to have something stored up in the pantry in case of flood, snowstorm, unemployment, or normal lifetime events that might happen. They may have enough for 3 or 4 months or so stored in their pantry just in case things get rough or tight at home. Right now, that's kind of us in our physical presence and evidence. But then, as I mentioned, there are the Armageddonists who are preparing mainly for the end times. Can they handle an everyday emergency that comes their way? Of course. However, their main focus is more on preparing for when major crap hits the fan and Yeshua's on his way. They're ready for all the theories of massive disaster or government intervention on worldwide and nationwide bases. Is it a sensible idea to prepare for the end times? Yes, it is. To be ready for prophesied events? Of course. You don't know if you or your family will need to rely on your planning. So yes, it makes sense to be ready for everything you possibly can. Which brings me to the final kind of prepper, who is how we feel in our hearts. It is a balance between the end times prepper or Armageddonist and the everyday prepper. We would like to be ready for long-term as well as short-term. Prophecy does state that things will happen, and we like to call it more of an insurance policy rather than an insurance policy, because we want to ensure some kind of stability for our families, ourselves, and even if we have animals, them as well. It's not an insurance policy where you're losing everything and it will be a financially stressful situation, but you will be financially satisfied in some way with an insurance policy because you have paid in advance for some kind of coverage in an emergency. Insurance, however, shows that we are more prepared to know what to do when those end times do arrive, or trying times. So we want to ensure, not insure. We're more like the third kind of prepper in our hearts, as I said. We want to be ready for whatever happens. However, I want to state that on a daily basis, families are likely to be hit with random life events more times than we can count. We have ourselves been hit with various events, like the ice storm in 2018 that revealed areas we needed improvement in on that end. And we also found the time during that time to share with others how they could get through it better with things that we did already know and use to get ourselves through. Just when I thought, though, that we had improved greatly on these random disasters, December 2022 rolled along. Now, we were fine during that Arctic blast that came down. We didn't have any issues. We were fine. Let me tell you a story. It was Shabbat morning, Saturday. I accidentally turned off my alarm when it went off at 6:30. I overslept, and I popped out of bed at 7:45, wide awake, ready to face the relaxation of the day. What's the first thing you do, most people do when they get out of bed? Have to make that potty stop. So I run to the restroom and I go to try and flush the toilet. Nothing. And this is actually after that entire cold blast came through. So we were no longer in those bitter cold temperatures. I popped the top off the tank of the toilet thinking maybe it just didn't refill. Maybe the chain broke again or something like that. Nothing. No chain broken, no valve left open, no water inside, empty tank, and no reason for it. My brain switches then into hyper mode, which it often does, and I start evaluating all the signs and symptoms I see. No immediate water leaks were found anywhere, nothing under the toilet, no water. So I turn to the closest faucet and I turn that on, and there's barely more than a trickle coming out. I check the tub. That faucet is running a bit more than the sink, however, still not real water pressure. Just as I'm starting to panic about our own lines, maybe something ruptured, maybe it didn't freeze, maybe something kicked in and damaged a line in some way. So here I am starting to think of the negatives when a neighbor texts and asks if our pressure is down, and I just go, phew. It's not just us. But then I started to question what it was. He sends me a photo then of a spot up the road a piece from our street. Huge water line ruptured, and it affected this whole area. You know what that means when it's a major line like that? The water company is coming along to shut off the water soon so they can fix the line, and you just know that's going to happen. So earlier I mentioned there's a difference between urgency and emergency. Well, in this case, to me, an emergency would have been one of our household water lines rupturing from freezing, age, or whatever. Could be our own main line from the street to the house, or one of the lines in the house. To me, that would be an emergency. It is something that needs to be repaired now and will be very costly to us personally. Plus, if that is the case, there is little you can do but gather as much water as possible before you shut off your own lines, and then try to get it fixed. And you don't know how long that could take. Now, an urgency, however, would be a water main break in the street down the road that affects you, but it isn't a burden upon you and your finances to get it fixed. This does affect you personally as well as all your neighbors, but the cost will not be on you unless your water company passes it down on you through increased rates. Now, the problem with this urgency, though, is you will be at the water company's mercy. And the same rule applies. You have to gather as much water as possible before they shut off that main line. Now, I knew by going back and forth that it appeared that the line had been reported as ruptured at around 4:30 in the morning, and it was already well past 9. When something like this happens, you have to get ready if you aren't prepared. And suddenly I realized everything we didn't have. We didn't have extra drinking water around. We didn't have water around in a barrel anywhere to flush toilets. It immediately revealed how totally unprepared we were for something like this. So I run around as fast as possible. I filled up the tubs, which took a long time with just a trickle. I tell you what, it really, it was funny to watch. I realized a couple of minutes in though that if I shut off the master bedroom tub and allowed the main tub to fill, it's smaller and it allowed more pressure to go in. So I did that, and then I went back and filled up the other tub. But then I also realized we're going to need cooking water and possibly bathing water and whatnot. So I grabbed every large pot, canning pots, stew pots, everything that was stainless steel that I could find, and I have a lot of them. I started filling with water and boiling as fast as I can, because at this point in time, you know that there's contaminants that have passed through into the line that is coming to you. So whether or not they declared a boil water emergency, I took it upon myself to assume there was one, because there's dirt and bacteria and whatnot being flushed down the line, and I wanted to kill whatever might be in there, parasites, anything. So I boiled all the water. Then I needed to check to see if we had any water storage for drinking. We just had a couple of gallons. So I decided to actually leave that alone and just go ahead and save that as an emergency supply. For us, we have no physical way of storing like a 55-gallon drum for water for flushing toilets in such a situation. So we have to find a solution to that. And we don't keep around enough storage to use gallon jugs either. That would be for drinking and cooking. Now that morning, before they shut the water off, I was actually able to grab a quick shower and take care of myself. But I didn't have to wash my hair that day, which takes a little bit more water. And there was barely a trickle coming out. Unfortunately, Jim wasn't able to get in quick enough to grab a hot shower real quick, and he didn't get one. But the worst part was, without our realizing it, somehow we ran our hot water tank dry. I'm thinking that it was not enough water pressure to fill the tank, and it caused a dry fire of the electric element in the tank. And we found out when water came on a few days later that it blew that tank element. Now, praise Yahweh, that was all it was. At least one of our neighbors did lose their entire hot water heater, and they had to replace that. For us, it was just a $15 element that we were able to replace, which was a great and wonderful blessing. But we were without water for a few days, which I'm going to say it was a blessing, but it was a challenge. And the reason why I say it's a blessing is comparison to other neighborhoods that went without water, because our line was not the only water main to rupture. A lot of them did throughout this county. Many of the people were without water for a week or more. On the second day, I took some of the huge pots of water and I boiled them, and I actually added them to a tub of cold water for flushing toilets. And I took a quick bath, and I also washed my hair. I went ahead and I did that. Now, did I let that water out of the tub? No, I did not. I still saved that bath water for toilet flushing, because it's just soap and whatever dirt might have been on my body. I wasn't working hard outside or anything. So I saved that for toilet flush. On the third day, we were able to get a little more water out of the faucets to do another bath for myself, and then Jim got one as well. We added hot water to the tubs. However, that was when we discovered that our element had gone out on the tank. There was nothing going into the tank, and there was no hot water going to come out of it. It took another couple of days for us to actually get the new one in, and I ordered 2 as a backup plan in case we lost water again and blew another one. It took us all day to replace the element because we weren't familiar with doing that job, although we had done it when we first moved in because the element was bad. But once we figured everything out, we were able to do it, and that evening we both got hot showers, and I suddenly realized, a nice long hot shower, how spoiled we are as Americans. We have so much so easy. And like I mentioned, a number of other mainline breaks happened all over our county because of the bitter cold wind chills that had gone on. And then we were warming back up again, and the water lines were just not withstanding what was happening. An additional contributor to the countywide problem was some serious issues with our own infrastructure, because there have been apparently repairs that have needed to be made over the decades, and they haven't been. It took a couple weeks for everything to be fixed. Everything got back online. We actually did lose water for about 36 hours on a second morning, and it was a Shabbat again. Figure that. Not long after that first one. I think it was the following weekend. Now, good news, we were better prepared with some water in storage, pots and pans still filled with water for having been boiled, and we had that second element for the tank. If it blew, the new one we had just installed, and we were going to be able to move faster because we were familiar. But praise Abba, nothing happened. We didn't need to replace it a second time, so now we have a spare. The first element, we got worried because it didn't seem to be heating the water, but we think it was just because our Appalachian water was so bitter cold. It took longer for it to heat up that entire tank. So I tell you, lose your ability to take hot showers in the middle of the Appalachians in the wintertime. You will really get a treat. Talk about an eye-opener. Our water is so cold. What did we learn altogether from this? Well, being a prepper is not just having our supplies for Armageddon or our little bit of food storage. It is changing our thinking and our attitude to be ready for anything. I reacted so quickly, it helped dramatically for us. I was able to get that all accomplished in such a short period of time. Teach your brain. You have to teach your brain, and that is what practicing is about. When you have issues that crop up, if you've practiced or you've done your little drills with your family, that is a great help. I didn't think it was helpful when my kids were little, but I'm telling you, it would be a help for all of you and for us. You will teach your brain to be able to quickly access information, assess the situation, and come up with some fast and effective solutions to help you and your family get through what's going on. Be prepared. Can you imagine if this happened with a couple of teenagers home after school in the afternoon? How would they have handled the situation if they hadn't been taught? What would they have done? What if you had them ready to respond instead rather than panic? So the first thing anyone should be doing is evaluate your own response time and your ability to respond. Make a note of things that worked and didn't work, and you might even find out ahead of time things that you need. Date your page. Briefly describe what happened in a situation like we went through, which is what I've done, and how we responded. I took notes, and I have those notes so that I can go ahead and adjust everything we have on hand. Now, things we did not think of. We did not think to shut off the hot water heater somehow. The best and fastest way for us to do it is the hot water tank is on its own circuit breaker. We should have flipped it. We didn't think. That is a big one for us. Had we done this at the very beginning of the first incident, we would not have blown that initial element. However, we knew to do it on the second incident, and we made sure it didn't cause a problem. What I did realize is that on that second Shabbat morning, the water had been off, literally off, for quite some time when I woke up. Now, had I gone and done what we did the other weekend, we could have easily have ensured that there was a dry tank and that element would have dry fired again. When I woke up, I immediately noticed the toilet tanks again. I woke Jim. He ran out, flipped the switch, turned off the hot water tank, and we were good. So we need to make sure that we are prepared for doing those little things that will save big things. I also know that we need to have on hand the tools to fix and replace any broken parts. In our case, we actually have 2 extra elements stashed now just in case, plus the tool to remove them and a short section of garden hose for draining. Part of our problem that day was trying to figure out how to empty the tank when we replaced the element. And the funny thing is we had repairs done a number of years ago by a company, and they put a piece of wood in front of the spigot, and we had to figure out how to cut through and remove a section so that we could get the hose out so we could drain the tank. So make sure you go over those little details, write them in a notebook. We also learned that there are things that we need to stock up on. We need a couple of barrels of water. How, I don't know. Where we're going to store them, I'm not sure, but we do need a couple of barrels. There are smaller ones we can buy that are about 30 or 35 gallons, but we need to have those on hand, and a pump to empty them. I learned that years ago as well. We also need to have on hand at least 50 gallons of water in jugs or bottles, and this will be used for drinking and cooking mostly. Toilet water can be any kind of water that you've gathered or can get your hands on, such as filling the tubs like we did. If by chance you might lose your water access to fill the tubs for this, you may need an alternative way to go to the bathroom as well. So take a careful look at your options for little toilets. Invest in one and try it. You're going to want to make certain you know how to use it in a drama, clean it in a drama, and teach your kids. Cases of water for drinking. They're easy to stack and might take up less space in your home. Figure out if that's your better option. I know that we found out we need a sturdier toilet seat for our toilet bucket. The flimsy one is not going to hold up long, so we're going to need a stronger one. We also need trash bags for the bucket to hold waste in, and I am going to be stocking up on some of that scoopable kitty litter. Scoopable cat litter is great for one of these emergency toilets. It's easier to scoop lumps out of that litter rather than having to resort to emptying the bucket constantly. You don't want to have to deal with liquid and poop and all that stuff, but if you have one of these toilet buckets, a bag, and cat litter in there, it'll be so much simpler. And then you just scoop everything into a bag. So make sure you also have a scoop and little trash bags to throw away any clumps. Now, a lot of these cat litters are also deodorizers, so that should help cut down. And figure out where you're going to store that in the emergency time. Like, are you going to put it into your bathroom? Are you going to put it out back in the woods? Figure out where you're going to put your little porta toilet. I also learned a simple dollar store item that we need to pick up. 2 2-gallon simple buckets with handles. You know, the kind you go to grab at the dollar store when you have a teenager car wash at school or whatnot? Yes, we need 2 of those because I have a 2-gallon bucket and I have a 5-gallon bucket or 4-gallon bucket, pardon me, and that 4-gallon bucket holds way too much water, and I spilled water all over the bathroom. So you need to make sure that you get that taken care of. It splashes everywhere if you're using a big one. Also, flushable wipes. In case you need to flush them after you go, make sure they are septic safe. Also used for washing if you don't have enough water stored to wash up. Now, this is just a few of the ideas I came up with. More come to me now and then, and I add them to my notebook. A lot of people think that when crap hits the fan, it will be a major event affecting massive amounts of people, but it is not always a major worldwide or nationwide event. Sometimes it is as localized as your own crap hitting the fan by not being able to flush your toilets when the water lines go out. I hope this helps you and your family think of ways to get your storage in order. Remember, subscribe, turn on notifications so you can see when the next video is available. Blessings and shalom.